Welcome to the Perfect Life Awakening Show, hosted by Royce Morales. Royce has been a transformational facilitator, teaching groundbreaking, spiritually based courses for more than 4 decades. She is the author of 3 books about her teachings. Join Royce as she takes you on a journey into how to live your best life and find your true purpose through discovering the origins of subconscious, disempowering notions and releasing them. She talks with experts and inspiring people just like you who learned to trust their intuitive inner wisdom, which led to life-changing shifts. Today, her guests live an empowered existence and are helping change the world to a higher consciousness place based on truth and love. You deserve to awaken to, align with, and embody your true self and live a life filled with love. Transform yourself from triggered to empowered and create your perfect life. Here is your host, Royce Morales.
Hello, welcome everyone. I am so glad that you are joining us today because this topic couldn't be more important and couldn't be more timely with everything that's going on right now if you're in the United States, you know what's going on with all this Epstein stuff. So I don't think there's anything that's more horrendous than the notion of human trafficking. We were talking before we went on the air and I was already moved to tears. So I'm warning you, this is an emotional topic. And my guest today is just phenomenal. She has been involved in this issue for a long time, and we're going to find out some of the things that she has to say about it, as well as some of the ideas that she has that could help stop it at the roots, because that's really what it needs. And again, this topic is just so bizarre to me that I can't even imagine why somebody would do it and where it's sourced from. And I hope that we get into all of that. So let me introduce my guest. Faith Wich is just amazing. She is a dedicated advocate in the fight against human trafficking, working alongside NGOs, international organizations, and communities across Europe and Africa. Right now, she's in Denmark, and my dog is barking. Okay. She doesn't want to hear any of this. Come here, Gigi. Come here. Come on. Anyway, so hopefully we'll be able to get some of it out before. Gigi, come here. Come on. There we go. Anyway, she focuses on preventing human trafficking through empowerment projects that help build resilience and opportunities for vulnerable populations. And she has years of experience as a change consultant, caseworker, and human trafficking consultant. She's pioneered impactful, I'm so sorry. She's pioneered impactful social entrepreneurship, women's empowerment initiatives, and training programs that tackle the root causes of trafficking. She's created sustainable paths for individuals to break free from cycles of exploitation. And even if it's not, there's still so much exploitation going on in this world. It's just crazy. And she firmly believes that prevention starts with empowerment, as it does for all of us in every way, but especially with this issue. And when Faith presented the idea of coming on my show and talking about human trafficking in terms of a spiritual issue, I thought, oh my gosh, that just sounds so intriguing and so beautiful. And I can't wait to hear what she has to say about that. So welcome, Faith. I'm so glad you're here.
Well, thank you so much for having me on, Royce. Thank you for the invitation. It was lovely. And it's really good to be here with all of you today. Now, Royce, you know that I always enjoy our talks, and we've had some thoughtful and insightful conversations. So it is my hope that today we will have one as well.
Yes.
Now, today I'm going to be talking about human trafficking. And I know that my bio has been shared. So instead of focusing on me, we're just going to center the conversation around the people most affected by the issue and the systems that fail them,
Well,
if that's okay.
before we get into that, I would like my viewers to know a little bit, how did you get involved in this? What spurred that for you? Just tell us.
I did not actually seek this journey, but that would be the whole show, Royce. It literally would be. But let's just say I had a lot of experiences which were very strange to me in the beginning, where people would approach me and just share their problems. And I didn't understand what they were describing because it just didn't make sense to me what they were asking me. The one who really was the catalyst was a Romanian woman in a train in Austria, and she was asking me how, you know, why she's not able to work, and she's been living in Austria, and she's married to an Austrian, and she's lived there for 10 years, and she doesn't understand. At that time, she said she doesn't understand how the system um, is not able to process her working permit. And I said, how long have they been processing the working permit? And she said, it was 7 years. And I said, that doesn't sound um, normal. And I remember going home and thinking about this. It just couldn't leave my mind. And I remember, looking it up, and then all these organizations came back. At that time, I didn't know anything about human trafficking. I had no clue about what that was. But my prompts were the questions she was asking. I said, what could this be? Because I knew that was not a normal process. What the things she was saying made no sense. So I found a few organizations and I called them up, and then they educated me on what I had encountered. Somebody who was possibly been trafficked, because there's a process. You have to identify the person as a victim and a survivor of human trafficking. You just cannot make assumptions. So luckily, this woman had given me her number. So when I called her back, I told her, you can call these numbers, and these organizations might have some answers for you regarding your questions. And she did. And basically, she was a victim of human trafficking within a marriage.
Wow.
Yes. So that happened. And so, long story short, this particular organization at that time, it was just very coincidental, but also very strange. But they realized that there was a way that people were approaching me. It was just very strange at that time. And so they asked if I could help with some casework. And because that particular woman said that she was not going to speak to anybody unless I was present. And so I said, okay, I could volunteer sometime. It was all strange how I was moving. I was using intuition. And so I did. And so it all went really well. And then things just took shape, and then I got trained into it. I got the psychosomatic, psychosocial trainings and all this stuff. And I couldn't believe what I was learning. I just couldn't believe what I was learning and what I was experiencing and what was happening. And so the very first case that I had was a woman who was trafficked in a marriage, not the way the media portrays it as sexual prostitutes or forced labor. No, it was actually a woman who was trafficked within a marriage. So long story short, maybe let's just say it fell on my lap, or it was just fate or destiny, or whatever you want to call it.
Yes.
But over the years, it just became a thing that I did. And then as time went by, I began to realize that whenever somebody exits and survives it and exits and leaves, they're never the same. The trauma is intense. The healing journey is a lifetime. The triggers are there. And I realized that the solution has to be prevention, because there is no way that we can count on people exiting also, because when you look at the data of how many people, of the millions and millions of people who are trafficked, relative to the persecutions, meaning those who get justice and those who exit, it is very minuscule. So I know people who work in this field also, it can tend to be very disheartening because the way the media shows it is, oh, there was a raid, it was prostitutes. They make the people look like, oh, it's, Miko with the, with the tattoos, or, Johnny with the piercings. That is the trafficker, these bad guys. But that's not really what the traffickers look like. The profiles vary from somebody in a nice suit, in a nice car, with a good job, could be a doctor, a teacher. Like, traffickers are in every profession, and so there's a miseducation in the portrayal in the media that this is the person who you should think is a trafficker. But meanwhile, trafficking is happening all around us. It is happening in your schools, it is happening in your restaurants, it is happening in your hotels, it is happening in your hospitals, it is happening literally everywhere. Somebody recently asked me, yeah, but Faith, where does trafficking happen? And I said, in your neighborhood, wherever you are, it is happening. Yeah, the au pairs, here in Europe, they call them the au pairs. They come, you can call them nannies and maids, or, but they're au pairs. They have a program under what is called an au pair. And a lot of trafficking happens there, you see. And so it's not just sexual prostitution that they keep on emphasizing. No, it is happening in forced labor. For men, it happens. It's a well-known fact that it happens in agriculture, in construction, and let's just face it, illegal immigration is a wonderful place for traffickers to recruit and traffic people, because undocumented people are very easy to go missing. So when you cheer at undocumented migrants and you cheer at illegal migrants, I think you don't recognize what you're looking at. You could be looking at potential human being who could be trafficked because they do not have, legal documents. Now, yes, trafficking does happen through even those who travel legally, but it also happens to those who are illegal. So both legal migration and illegal undocumented migration can have cases where people are trafficked. So it is a complex situation, and I also know it's a painful topic. But if we are going to be real about it, then I think we have to agree that it is one that urgently needs our attention.
Yes.
And our honesty, most of all, and then our action. And when I say honesty, I mean you literally have to look at some of the things that you might do that are subtle, that you're not aware of, but you are actually participating. Now, what do I mean by this?
Yeah.
You might be happy that you got a deal. You got this $5 dress. Now, you have to ask yourself, okay, what does it take to make a dress? Fabric. Before it became a fabric, it was cotton, it was raw material, it was a cotton, it was silk, it was something. So it was processed, right? So this fabric was processed, and then it went through a period of the fabric, the material was transported, it was harvested, processed, transported, made into a fabric, and then there were patterns involved. Someone made the patterns. There was a garment, that was made using some form of machinery and some form of labor. Once this was done, for the dress to reach you where you are, or to reach your favorite shop, there was a vehicle involved, some fuel, somebody's time and transportation. Now, that dress has reached the store, and that person running the store has to pay rent for the store, has to pay their workers, and has to pay taxes and all that goes with running a store. So you have to ask yourself, how is it that your dress costs $5 and the store is still functioning?
Yeah.
So we have to be conscious that Somewhere along the way, there was some form of overworked, underpaid slave labor. Um, Something happened. I hope you can see where I'm going with this. There is no way on earth that this dress costs $5. It does not make any mathematical sense, at least not from my standpoint.
Mhm.
And this is a very general example. It's a simple one as well, but it's just, these are the examples I give people because I like people to think in a practical way, because the legal systems that we are, not just legal, let's just say the systems that we are seeking to help solve this problem are broken. These systems are vulnerable, and they're not, there are many reasons why these systems don't work as effective as they should. It could be also they're inadequate. It could be lack of resources, lack of awareness. There are many issues. There are many underlying issues as to why the systems are vulnerable, and in some case, they're broken as well. Now, I'll give an example of the legal system, why it's a possibility. And I'm overgeneralizing because each of the topics I'm talking about today, those are shows in itself. Actually, it can be a playlist if I'm to break it down. But let's take the legal system, for example. The legal system involves the law, the legal law under certain sections and mandates and whatever the legalities of the crime committed entails. So they look at it from that point of view. The policeman and the police force look at the criminal aspect of things. Then you have the social workers who are looking at the human rights aspect and the social aspect of things. And the healthcare workers are doing their healthcare thing. Now, when these systems meet, sometimes they're not speaking together. They're not speaking well together because if the lawyer can prove that you are an illegal migrant, then he has proved within the law that you came illegally. But from the social aspect of things, the social worker is trying to tell the legal system that they were coerced into being an illegal migrant. They did not come to your country willingly. There was a coercion. Their family back home in Yemen or in, Nigeria or in the Philippines or in Poland is being threatened. Now, I'm just picking random countries, okay? So they have to do as they're told. And there's also a debt bondage attached to it based on other factors, which I won't go into because it's, again, it would take a very long and lengthy explanation. But they have a debt bondage, which is a debt that they must pay in order for them to be released and their family to be released. So the social worker is trying to say, hey, hold on a minute. This is a human rights violation. This person was coerced and they have been exploited and their human rights have been violated. And the court is saying, yeah, but they did come to this country illegally and they broke the law. So is it true that they came to the country illegally? Yes, it's true. Okay, so you broke the law. And the social worker is saying, no, but that's not the entirety of the story. The police here is now saying, okay, so we have a criminal here. Now we are going to criminalize them and put them in prison because they broke the law. So who is to blame here? You see, these three systems, and there are other systems, of course, I just picked the three main ones, but there are other systems, there are healthcare systems, there are others that are involved. And they have to be able to speak one language. The legal system should understand that they're looking at somebody who has been violated, whose human rights have been violated, and they're also looking at a moral ill, something that has happened that should go against the morality of your own culture and your country. The moral standing of what you could perceive or call yourself as a country or a culture or a nation should be something that you should be able to see and say, this should not be happening in our country because we have a moral responsibility, right? And the police should also look at who is the real criminal here. Is it this person that we caught on the streets, doing what their trafficker told them? What about the trafficker? Who is behind the person? Because it's a whole network, right? It's not just one person doing things, it's a whole network, right? So there's a lot that comes into play. And this is why, again, I looked at this from so many different angles. And Royce, it all came down to prevention. Because by the time you are caught up and you're a survivor of human trafficking, whether you get out, you're going to have to deal with some of these systems, and you might never get justice. Not because that the lawyer is doing what he or she's supposed to do as a lawyer. Protect. If you're a criminal lawyer, that's what you do. You know, I know it sounds very harsh and hard, but that's the world we have built. We have created a world where this is how it works. So the social care workers also, I know they advocate for human rights visas, but the human right visa also has certain things that are tied to it. And of course, you have to prove a very strong case. And usually the evidence is not always, there, because over years of forced labor, sexual exploitation, and different coercive techniques and systems that have been used onto you, sometimes these tend to be intangible. You can't say this happened, he abused me, bit me. The scars maybe have healed over years. You don't have scars anymore to prove. You may have old pictures, but, it gets very tricky, with years to get the justice. And so for me, it all boils down to prevention. And and prevention starts with awareness and education. And I say to people, the simplest thing you can do if you want to really, really help end human trafficking is start in your homes. What do I mean by this? Raise children who are not broken. Do not traumatize the people around you, neighbor, whether you're in a school. If you're in a school and you're a teacher, think about your students. Make sure you're raising people who are whole. They're not broken. They're not traumatized. They're confident. They're healthy in mind, body, and spirit. And why I'm saying this is because traffickers prey on brokenness. They look for people who are broken and traumatized. They look for people who are vulnerable socially and economically. Of course, poverty also plays a role because they can lure you with gifts and, I can take care of you, I can feed you, I can nurture you, whatever, right? So if you want to know what to do, I think the first thing you can do is pay attention to how you treat each other. Because if you are a participant in creating brokenness in people, trauma in people, abusive language, abusive behavior, physically, mentally, spiritually, or socially, you are actually creating the potential next victim or target for a trafficker, because these are the people they prey on. I'm sorry, I have a bit of a cough, so I hope it's not so destructive, but these are the people that they prey on. So if you want to be of big help, let us focus on have a healthy home. Because imagine if, Royce, if you had a healthy home, your children are confident, and this also includes economics, because they also prey on poverty and lack. So imagine if you're able to take care of each other, which means you may have to share, and you may have to move away from the excessive greed, right? So imagine if you have done all these things, what is the trafficker going to use to lure your children? They're well taken care of. They know they have value. They're confident. Then they're not traumatized. They're healthy, And I could go on, but this is very, very important. And that's what I mean by just keeping it simple and being honest about finding a solution and then moving into action in the most simplest way. And it benefits everybody, literally.
So I have so many questions. As you're talking, first of all, I'm thinking about what you said about don't traumatize your children and raise them with confidence and all of that. That's, I think, a lot easier said than done, mainly because we're so vulnerable from the beginning, from arrival here, that, my idea of being traumatized might be that my mom didn't pick me up when I was crying. Somebody else's idea of trauma might be I was beaten until I was bloody. We all have our different levels of what traumatizes us. So it's kind of, I would say, very difficult to make sure to raise your children without trauma because, gosh, when I lost my teddy bear, it was traumatic. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, but I think that you do what you can do. And of
Yeah,
course, as a parent, most parents will tell you if you have several children, every child has a different need.
yeah.
So there's no blueprint that I can give you and say do A and B. You have to understand your child. What does your child need in order to feel whole?
Mhm.
And we were talking about this, in the beginning, you mentioned the spiritual side of human trafficking. And what I see, and this is an observation, so it's also left to interpretation. And, and of course, it doesn't maybe fit every single person's, every survivor's case or story. But I have seen the aspect of loss and the reclamation of one's identity is very important. And it's one that the traffickers focus on in the very early stages of human trafficking, or you can go as farther back into the grooming stages. What the human traffickers often do is they strip the individual of their sense of self.
Mm.
Now, what does that mean? It means their names, their stories, their dignity, their life, their support system, that thing that makes them who they are. Now, with this loss of identity, which is not just physical or social, but is also spiritual because it's an aspect of who you are, it is your essence, you see that the healing process of survivors requires them to start retrusting themselves, reclaiming their true self, finding it, because the first thing they do is strip that off so that, you know, you don't have that, um, you don't have that connection to self. And spiritually, we know that when you don't have that connection to self, we know what that can look like, right? Because
Sure.
not having that connection to self, I think, will interfere with your inherent self worth, your purpose, your identity, and I think this kind of loss of identity, I think, can be very traumatizing. And I say this because you can't put a finger on it. A lot of these things are intangibles, like you said. They can't really be measured. But a lot of our systems require a measurement. They require proof and they require evidence. So how do you measure your trauma in a
Mm.
legal system? You see, so this is where again we go back to the prevention. And what you, like you said, what you call trauma is not what somebody else calls trauma. But trauma is a tool that is used. So wherever you are, you have to always think, whether even in the workplace, you have to think of your actions. Are your actions creating broken people? Because then you are creating somebody who's going to then be vulnerable and become a target for somebody who wants to fill the hole of the gap, make them feel valuable and special, make them feel cared for and valued. So these are the things that I mean when people say, what can I do? You can change how you behave towards others. And the more whole, the more we start to have people who know they're valued and people who are now showing up as whole and not broken, and people who know that, somebody cares. You go to work and it's not about this toxic competition, but it's about caring for each other. Then the gaps that are used will start to close off.
Mhm.
These are some of the gaps. And if this is not done, Royce, and this is what I meant by the urgency of changing our behavior, this is what we're going to see the manifestation in a bigger way of our collective shadow. Right
Yeah.
now, people think that we are seeing it as a big thing. Remember, human trafficking, with all the work that there's so many people who worked so hard in this field to help, to support in all the fields I mentioned, the legal, the criminal, the police, and the social workers, the caseworkers. But like I said, they don't design the systems. So you can do so much work here and so much work here and so much work here and somewhere in between. But if they're not talking, then it's everyone is walking their own walk. But these systems have to talk. So if we if we don't focus on looking with honesty, it really requires just honesty. I know it seems so simple, but most people don't survive, you know. And when they survive, the wounds and the trauma requires a lifelong healing.
Yeah.
So I know maybe people who work in this field may have a different way of problem solving, and I commend them because when it comes to such a complex area, there are probably 1,000 ways to solve this problem. My observation is prevention.
Right.
Yeah, because this collective shadow thing, it's larger than what we call a societal ill or a moral responsibility. You know, it is built on prejudice, it is built on fear, it is built on the imbalances, whether social, economic, or financial, and it is built on the lack of moral responsibilities by our communities and our cultures and countries.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Isn't a lot of it based on the fact that people don't even know this is happening? You know, this it seems like in the last few years it's slowly starting to come into our consciousness, but mostly people are kind of like, "Oh, really? That happens?"
Yeah, because human trafficking is one of those things that is actually hidden in plain sight.
Yeah.
You know, and I want to invite all our listeners to literally take the time, and if you want to understand the profile of a trafficker that you might not have thought about, go and watch. I think they made a documentary on Netflix, but it's a story of an Australian, not Australian, Austrian. It's a story of an Austrian girl, Natasha Kampusch. Go and find that documentary, or even just Google Natasha Kampusch in Austria, and you will see what the profile was. If you look at her story, you will realize that the people who are the traffickers are the closest to us. You know, so when people are saying, "Oh, that happens," yes, it happens because trafficking is not. I think, Royce, people think that when you talk of human trafficking, everyone thinks of prostitution and sexual exploitation. But they don't think of the underpaid and overworked cleaners who clean your hotel rooms. They don't think of the au pairs. They don't think of the people who pick the fruits. You know, I think there's a case right now, and I'm not sure how that's going, but I think it's Lidl, the supermarket, and it was brought to light that their fruit pickers who pick the strawberries are not even allowed to use the restroom.
Jeez.
So this is what I mean by the collective shadow. Because remember, the laws of the systems are in place, but who is enforcing these things? That who is this supervisor who said you cannot use the restroom? Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I mean. And also, like, you know, when you go through when you start identifying a survivor or a victim of human trafficking, we changed the word from victim to survivors because they're not victims anymore, they're survivors. That's why I use that
Good.
to some of our listeners who might not understand why I'm saying that. But when you're going through identifying the survivors of human trafficking, one of the key questions you ask are, what is your work like? What are your working hours like? You know, do you have breaks and days off? This is to identify survivors of human trafficking who've already been rescued from a place that was obviously doing something they were not supposed to be doing. Now, some of you know that where you work, you're not allowed a break. Some of you know that where you work, you don't get a day off. Some of you know that where you work long hours, way above what is humanly possible, and you get paid minimum wage or If you're illegal or undocumented, even less. So this is what I mean by having the awareness of what is happening, because Royce, if you dig deep into the list of identification, everyone in the chat or will be raising their hand. Have you ever asked for permission to use the restroom all your life?
Yeah.
Freedom of movement. Do you have the freedom to leave your place of work or your home freely whenever you want to, how and when you want to?
Well,
How many people cannot do that? You have to ask permission, right? Is your financial, and I'm just picking, we have over 100 questions that you go through. There are many, and they're broken into different categories depending on who you're identifying. But these are the general ones. Does anyone withhold financial resources as a form of coercion or blackmail? I want the housewives to raise their hands because human trafficking, yeah. Can you put on anything that you want to put on the way you want to wear it, how and when you want to wear it? You may think that these are questions that are only asked of prostitutes, but some of you cannot dress as you choose. So this is the thing, Royce. Everyone thinks, oh, this is not me, this is them. But when I share these questions, has anyone ever held financial resources as a form of coercion or manipulation to make you, right?
well, yeah.
I could go on and on. And that's why I say it's a painful topic and a difficult one, but it requires honesty, because then you get off your high horse and you stop thinking that, when survivors come forth and talk and share their stories, people are too quick to critique and to judge them and even dehumanize them and say, how are they so stupid? How did they do this? Why didn't they know better? But that's not the case. They were trafficked by it was never their fault. They were targeted, they were groomed, and they got into a very difficult situation. And now we are looking at somebody who has survived. That should be the key word. But the reason also a lot of survivors don't come forth is the shame and the humiliation and the lack of compassion that comes from the public. But if I was to read the whole list of identification, many people would get off their high horse and realize that, hold on, this happened to me, but I'm not to blame for not being able to have freedom of movement from my workplace. You see, you're not to blame for that. You didn't make the rules.
Yeah. We need to take a break, but when we come back, I want to talk to you a little bit more about the trash truck is here. All kinds of noise. Anyway, I want to talk to you some more about the spiritual implications of this, because as you're talking, I'm thinking, well, first of all, I just flashed on a memory. I owned my own business in Redondo Beach, California, and it's a very high level area, shall we say, very wealthy area. And there was this beautiful cafe that was opened right in the center of Redondo Beach. And it only stayed open for a year because all of a sudden there were rumors going around that all the employees were trafficked. And everyone in Redondo Beach was absolutely shocked, just mortified. How could this happen in Redondo Beach? And what do you mean? And it was such a beautiful cafe, and everybody was dressed so nicely, and the employees were all so nice. Well, they were all trafficked, and they had to close. And I had completely forgotten about that, and it just blew everyone away because this doesn't happen. I mean, that was the attitude. This doesn't happen. So it can be happening. We don't even realize it. And it's so out of our reality that we can't even conceive that it could happen in such a nice place like Redondo Beach. But anyway, we will be right back. I'm talking to Faith Wich, and we are talking about such a horrendous topic, and we're going to get into the spirituality of all of this in a minute. We'll be right back.
Times TV.
Do you crave joy but feel stuck? Do you go through life feeling constantly triggered and frustrated? Fear is likely the culprit, and subconscious fear is likely sabotaging you. Perfect Life Awakening is a time-tested, spiritually based approach to inner transformation created by Royce Morales. For over 40 years, she has helped people get to the origins of subconscious fears and ultimately help them find their true purpose and a life full of joy. Sign up for Perfect Life Awakening today at roycemorales.com. You deserve to go from triggered to empowered, shifting your life with Perfect Life Awakening.
Imagine becoming a super influencer. Reinvent yourself, invest in your brand, and then manifest your success with a robust spheric approach. Om Times Media and Broadcasting offers a unique and multifaceted way to become the spiritual and conscious influencer you deserve to be by putting your message across our powerful platform with its proven record of integrity and excellence. Through our produced shows, Om Times offers the opportunity to become a social media TV personality, a radio show host, an Om Times magazine columnist, and a syndicated podcaster, all in one shot. By live streaming your show on Om Times TV and broadcasting it across the extensive Om Times radio and TV networks, you become more than a host. You become an ambassador and a force for positive change. Om Times. Open yourself to the possibilities.
I want to eat apples and bananas. I need to eat apples and bananas. Why can't I eat apples and bananas?
Support the Feeding America nationwide network of food banks to help provide meals to those in need. Join us at feedingamerica.org.
Welcome back. I am talking with Faith Wich, and we're talking about human trafficking. And if you're hanging in there with us, thank you, because this is such an important topic. And as you keep saying, it's so important that people know about it, not only to prevent it, but from my viewpoint, it's from resolving why we would even do that to another human being. And that, I think, is the spiritual question. Why? Why? But I wanted to add my 2 cents. And as you know, Faith, I talk about this on your show a couple times. And that is how the truth is, on a spiritual level, we choose our lifetime. We figure out what will be the best way for us to learn our lesson and to clean up anything that we've done in past lives, and to bring whatever it is that we're supposed to bring to this lifetime, to our family, to our children, to the world. And that, as far as I'm concerned, is what everybody does. So people that go through human trafficking have, on some spiritual level, chosen to go through this for all of the above reasons, maybe to clean something up that they've done, or maybe to bring some important awareness to the world. I'll vote for that one, because it just seems like, we've got to get it. We've got to understand why we as a society, as you said, the shadow part of society, why we allow that to happen. There must be part of us that says, oh, it's okay, whatever, or we just don't know enough about it to say, no, this is not okay. So let's talk about that a little bit. Why would somebody on a spiritual level choose to go through such a horrendous lifetime like that? Do you have thoughts about that?
I do, because Royce, I'm Mrs. Practical, right? And when it comes to the horrendous, this is a good word that you use, the horrendous things that survivors have experienced, I tend to think that I cannot see how you chose this, because again, I see things from a very practical standpoint, right? And I always wonder, I know, I've talked to guests, guests who have shared, their perspective on reincarnation and how, you have a contract and whatever. And because of the way my mind works, which is in the practical sense, those who've shared to me that Earth is a school where you're here to learn lessons, I tend to look at it from a practical way that if I am going to a school, then I should know at what grade I am entering the school. So I should know that I entered in kindergarten and now I'm going to first grade. I should also know that I'm entering at the master's level and I'm here to do the PhD. And I should be able to have all the tools and the equipment from all my years of education in art school to be able to excel in my PhD level. Now, for me, I don't see the evidence of this because when people come to the school, they almost come without knowing what it is. They don't come with there's no curriculum. There's no blueprint of what it is that you're here to study. There's no evidence that it's not running like a school that wants you to excel. Meaning you should have the curriculum in place. If I'm a teacher and I want you to excel, I should equip you with the curriculum. I should equip you with the tools, and I should let you know that you are excellent in history in your last grade. And now I want you to up it up again because we're going to history 301, right? Because you did well in 201. Now, with this in mind, remember, I am very practical in the sense that I can see this as, because human beings, let's just face it, if they don't have to do something, then they don't have to do it. That's the human nature. If I don't have to clean the house and I could wave a wand and it could get cleaned miraculously, I'm sure many people would pick that option. And so if people believe that you're going through this experience because you chose it, they might back off and say, why should I interfere with their school? Why should I interfere with their learning experience? But what I've seen from human trafficking is every single person, and I haven't met one whose exit or survival was not based on the help of a stranger. I've not met one who it wasn't. And I had a guest on, Sherry Lopez. She calls the person who helped her an angel. So I've had these stories of angels, of people helping. So basically, most survivors depend on the help from another person, and most of the people who I have seen, and this is an observation, and I know people who have worked in this field have encountered a plethora of characters, but the people that I have come to see have been trafficked have been the kindest, sweetest people. Those people who trust and give unconditional love. And this is also something that people have taken advantage of because they trust that what you say is the truth. And I believe you when you said that you will care for me because I have been abused here by my parents. I went from one foster care home to another, and now you say you'll give me a home. I trust that you will do the right thing. Now, again, you have to realize that trafficking is a business. It is a business. And so the traffickers don't see the human being as a human being. They're more in the business of commodification of human life. So when they look at you, they're trying to see what is this product and what is the business model. I know it sounds really bad, but these are the realities. We want to have an honest conversation. We have to understand this because, again, you mentioned the spiritual side of it. If everyone turns a blind eye, which I think more people have turned blind eyes than helped, the numbers of human trafficking, regardless of how hard people are working in this field, is going like this. It's going like this, not like this. It's going like this. So with that in mind, and then the resources, because it's going like this, there is then a shortage of resources for all these different areas. So there are less shelters and there are less shelter care workers because the numbers are going like this, not like this. And so again, spiritually, I've seen that these people who helped, and I don't want to, yeah, there was one particular man who, God bless his soul, he was, he called because he suspected that a woman was being exploited on the street. And he was brave enough to call. And I remember the hotline asked him, "Why did you make this call?" And he said, "Intuition."
Mm.
He didn't know anything about human trafficking. He knew nothing. In fact, he was, he was a man on the street looking for manly things. Okay. So, but he said, "No, this doesn't seem right," you know, and his intuition saved 5 lives, not one. He called for one, but 5 were saved.
Wow.
So this is what, again, the spiritual side of things is the intuition, that inner knowing. If it feels wrong, and you're observing it, especially when you're places and you're trying to talk to someone and someone keeps talking over them and answering the questions for them, and they don't get to say a word, but you're specifically speaking to them because you can sense something is off, then there is something off there.
Mhm.
So that intuition and that inner voice, that inner knowing, and that inner I don't know what to say. Yeah, it's an inner knowing. It goes both ways because even the survivors said, because these were people who they trusted, an auntie, a trusted uncle, a friend, an auntie, and, people they really trusted. So it takes time to believe that someone you love, you trust, and care for is doing these things to you,
Yeah.
And so they said there was an inner voice that said, enough is enough. You see, so again, they found their spiritual connection to that aspect of themselves that was still there, that little spark. And then within that spark, they found the energy to leave. But then that's where the journey begins of healing.
Yeah.
So that's one aspect of things.
Yeah. As you're talking, I'm thinking, I think all of us have experienced moments like that, whether it's through trafficking or just getting into a relationship that you shouldn't get into, or marrying somebody that you know is wrong for you. All of us have that inner knowing, and we just don't listen to it. And then we learn, oh, I should have listened to it. So yeah. And back to your example of education or going to school, human school.
Yeah. Let's just say I'm not a believer. Yeah.
We are told where we land. We're told all of this in terms of spiritually upon arrival. It's like, okay, you're landing in kindergarten because you really need to learn a lot, or you're landing in that PhD level because you know it all already. But we don't remember until something triggers us to remember. I know I had my awakening at a certain point where I was like, oh, that's who I am. And then I kind of jumped up a few grades real fast because I was sort of stuck in those lower grades for a while because I hadn't remembered yet. But we all do know, we do know, and it's just a process of awakening. And maybe some of us have to awaken through being trafficked, whatever it takes. I always say that to people. It's like, wow, I had to go through a lot of hell to get to awaken. And whatever it takes, I'm grateful for it. So, and again, it needs to go back down to the roots of why we as humans are feel like it's okay to do this to other humans. Why is it okay to go to war? Why is it okay to take advantage of people? Why is it okay to lie to people or take them from their home or their country? That's the lesson for all of us. And I think on some level, we are all okay with certain, even what you were saying about buying that $5 dress. We're okay with that because we just go, la, 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 la. I don't see that this was a trafficked dress and I like it. So what? It's $5. We have that attitude toward things rather than, no, this is not okay. It's not okay to cut down the rainforest for toilet paper. It's not okay. So, we need to awaken. There we go. So what else? We only have a couple of minutes here. What else can you say that will inspire our audience to take action and to make some changes in their life and to be aware?
I think that when you stand from a standpoint and you ask yourself, when you're present in your actions, per se, and you ask yourselves, what am I supporting? Is it part of the problem, or is it part of the solution? Right? Because I use the collective shadow for lack of better words. I just don't know which other words to use to describe the reality surrounding power, privilege, complicity, not my business, none of my business. I can only focus on me, but that's not the reality of where we live in. There is no individuality. I know people like to say we are individuals. Yes, we are. Me and Royce are not the same, as you can see. We are very individual in a lot of things, in the way we think, in the way we live, in a lot of things, and even in the way we look, right? But when you look at the bigger picture, we are all participating as part of an ecosystem. You eat food that is coming from Mother Nature. You drink the water, you breathe the air. The food was grown by somebody. You didn't grow it yourself. You didn't do everything yourself. The dresses we're wearing, we didn't make these dresses, the jewelry. So you're not an individual in that sense. The furniture you sit on, from the wood to the fabrics on it, involved others and involved Mother Nature, the raw materials, right? So your home is a whole ecosystem, and it already shows you that there's a collective responsibility, right? So I think the only thing I ask as my parting words is, okay, okay.
We've 1 minute.
Yes, yes, yes. I think in a nutshell, I think pay attention, be present, and just think about your actions, in the sense that what you're doing, is it beneficial or detrimental to others and
Yes.
yourself? Thank
And
you, Rose.
how do they give us your website? I know it's on the screen, but tell
Yeah.
us your website.
Yeah, you can, if you have questions, I always say reach out, because these are emergency questions. Usually reach out to the emergency numbers. Okay? First, that's what I tell people. But if you have other questions, maybe you work with human trafficking and need some guidance and you need some support, then you can reach out to me. gwc.org, and then the email is on the screen, flower@gwc.org. Okay?
Thank you.
But always remember, people, you reach out to the emergency numbers first, because there is a process and there's a protocol.
Great. Gotta go. Thank you so much. Keep up the
Thank
incredible
you.
work. It was so great to talk with you. And
Same here, Royce, always.
thank you all so much for listening and being aware. Thank you. See you
Thank
next week.
you. Okay.